This is our discussion on Chapter 22, Negotiable Instruments. I want to point out a couple of matters before we begin, which is that many students find this material to be the most challenging in the course. Indeed, I think that's true, but for the reason that the material itself is very foreign to most students' experiences. Most students have not worked for banks or financial institutions, which is where most of the discussions on negotiable instruments arise. Consider focusing then more on the vocabulary work to get around the steep learning curve in this chapter and the following. My lecture is designed to guide you through these two chapters. The reason I say two, though, is because Chapter 22 basically defines our terms, while Chapter 23 reviews the use of those terms. So if I were studying, I would combine them in my vocabulary flashcard set. Let's begin then with slide 2. So as a note before we start, we're finished with Article 2 in the Uniform Commercial Code. No more contracts, no more sales of goods in the following material. Yet the UCC has other articles which help commerce. Articles 3 and 4 are going to be our sources of law for the upcoming two chapters. The first term, negotiable instrument, is a term that does not paraphrase well. I would advise that you just memorize the term as it is written. A signed contract containing an unconditional promise to pay an exact sum of money. It doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but please put it to memory. Consider also page 3, the discussion of the types of negotiable instruments. But I'd like to start with the most basic and simple and then work my way up. The most elementary is a draft. The draft is a simple instrument. It is just three parties. 1, I'm asking or I'm ordering. 2, the person holding my money. 3, that the person pay the payee. In this chapter, it is advisable to start using new vocabulary. Here I am the drawer, drawing on my account of money that is due me by the drawee. The drawee holds my money. I then order, since this is an order instrument, the drawee to pay. So therefore the drawee is the payor, and the party who's receiving the money is the payee. The draft is the foundation for our series of negotiable instruments. Now we move to checks. A check is merely a special draft. In this case, the drawee is a bank, and that's the only essential difference between a draft and a check. I order, my bank. The drawee is the drawee bank, who through my order or my pay to the order or my command then pays to the person listed on my check, that is the payee. Next, going up, a cashier's check or a teller's check are very similar. Teller's check is an order instrument, pay to the order of whoever is the payee, and it's drawn on another bank to then pay the named payee. In other words, it's an order for another bank, in other words, payable at another bank, to pay the payee. A cashier's check is an order to pay a named payee from a fund at that particular drawee bank. So it's actually the bank's own check on itself. So if I were to write a check and I were a bank, I would not then call it a check, I would call it a cashier's check. You can see as we move up, the instruments become more complicated in form. The cashier's check is generally regarded as a gold standard to convey money, meaning that if it's money from the bank on the bank's check is fairly reliable. That is, a fairly reliable instrument. In other words, it negotiates rather well. Moving up, traveler's checks are drawn on a bank, but they're countersigned later to make them negotiable. In other words, the check is drawn on a bank or a financial institution, which signs the order. And then at the purchase time to pay, you must sign for the last signature or a last step to make it negotiable. Thus, they have two signatures, one at the bank and one at the retailer or wherever you're using them. In that way, it's a safer bank product to carry with you as you travel if you lose them unsigned. If you lose them unsigned, they're worthless. The last one is the trade acceptance agreement, and this one is a bit more complicated. I've attached in one of a picture in the next slide, if you look at the next slide in the PowerPoint, for you to see. We used to have a book that had a picture or gave us more detailed information on trade acceptance agreements, but they removed that from the book's edition. It's really challenging, I think, to discuss a trade acceptance agreement on video, but these are still being used, even though it's less frequent. It's because the electronic funds transfers, the EFTs and the ATM cards, are quite abundant. But there are still certain industries where merchants work every day with each other and still use these. If one merchant owes another merchant in the same area or the same street or district certain money, rather than writing checks back and forth, they just agree, hence the nature of a trade acceptance agreement. They just agree that they will pay a certain amount drawn on a third-party bank. So as you get into trade acceptance agreements and you're curious, email me. I can certainly give you more information. The next slide, promissory notes. Promissory notes are two-party instruments, meaning that they memorialize terms such as maker or bearer. So remember to start using the terms promissory note, maker, bearer, drawer, drawee bank, and all. Note that promissory means I promise. I promise to pay you a sum certain on a particular day at a specific interest rate. The maker agrees and signs, and the bearer holds a note, thus the bearer becomes the holder. A certificate of deposit is the same thing, but it's now the bank's promise. So think of it as a loan to your bank. The bank is borrowing money from you, and so it promises to pay back a sum certain at a particular date, etc., based upon a certain interest rate. You are the promisee and the holder and the bearer. And when the CD has come due, the bank pays you back your principal and the interest.